A 1.2 million square foot factory, silent. 1,000 jobs, erased in a single day. More than $100 million in losses, hemorrhaged in just 2 years. This is what became of Canada's once powerful tractor empire. Names like Massey Ferguson and Cockshutt that commanded global agriculture from the factory floors of Brantford and Hamilton. At their peak, they built 30,000 machines a year and reshaped how the world farmed. So how did an empire forged in steel and diesel collapse into ruin? That story begins with a 1987 foundry. In 1877, a modest foundry opened its doors in Brantford, Ontario. Jack Cockshutt, the son of a blacksmith, stood at the heart of the operation, forging plows and harrows for a landscape still bound by horse-drawn farming. The Cockshutt Plow Company began with little more than grit, iron, and an eye for the needs of Ontario's growing farm belt. Within a decade, Cockshutt's name had spread across the province, stamped onto iron implements that promised reliability in every furrow. By 1892, the company's confidence rang through the pages of the Brantford Expositor. Strength in every plow, Cockshutt leads the way. The slogan wasn't just marketing. It echoed from wheat fields to township halls, where farmers swapped stories of machines that outlasted the toughest seasons. The company's early years saw rapid expansion. Cockshutt hired local craftsmen, invested in new casting techniques, and kept production humming year-round. The foundry's output grew from a handful of plows to a full line of seeders, cultivators, and eventually, the first Canadian-made disc harrows. By the turn of the century, Cockshutt captured nearly a third of the province's implement market. Dealers from as far as Manitoba traveled to Brantford to secure contracts. Jack Cockshutt's approach was simple: build strong, build local, and serve the farmer. This philosophy gave the company a 30% share of the Canadian tractor market after World War II. A figure that would become legendary in the decades to follow. The Cockshutt name became a fixture at agricultural fairs and in the ledgers of rural banks, a symbol of the promise that Canadian industry could stand on its own. With each shipment, another piece of the country's industrial future rolled out of Brantford, carrying the hopes of a generation that believed progress was forged in steel and sweat. Daniel Massey started out in Newcastle, Ontario, with a vision that reached far beyond the boundaries of his family's workshop. By the late 1800s, he had already transformed Massey manufacturing into a force, but it was the merger with A. Harris, Son and Company, in 1891 that set the stage for something far larger. The new entity, Massey Harris Limited, was incorporated on October 12, 1891, with a share capital of $2 million, a staggering sum for the era. This wasn't just a business deal. It was a declaration that Canadian industry could compete with the giants south of the border. Within 2 decades, Massey Harris was shipping binders, reapers, and mowers across the continent. By 1910, its machines rolled off the assembly lines in Toronto and made their way to the American Midwest, the wheat fields of Australia, and the plains of Argentina. The company's catalog boasted implements that promised to revolutionize the harvest, and the reach of its dealer network stretched from Nova Scotia to California. For the first time, a Canadian brand was not just matching, but outpacing many American rivals in exports and global sales. Daniel Massey's ambition was matched by an appetite for innovation. Massey Harris invested heavily in steel fabrication and mass production, building sprawling factories that became fixtures in industrial Ontario. The company's early advertising didn't shy away from bold claims. The world's largest makers of harvesting machinery appeared in trade journals as early as 1905. Behind the slogan stood real numbers. By 1910, Massey Harris was exporting more farm equipment than any other Canadian manufacturer, with shipments to over 30 countries. This rise set up a rivalry that would define Canadian manufacturing for generations. As Cockshutt's plows carved their reputation into Ontario soil, Massey Harris looked outward, building an empire on steel, ambition, and global reach. The seeds of a future merger and the dual-brand dynamic that would shape the tractor age were already in the ground. In the spring of 1946, a new machine rolled out of Brantford that would change how Canadian farmers worked their land. The Cockshutt 30 arrived as the country's first homegrown tractor with a fully integrated hydraulic lift system, a leap forward that let farmers raise and lower implements on the move. No need to stop or wrestle with heavy levers. Under its cast iron hood, a 4-cylinder Buddha engine delivered steady power, but it was the hydraulic 3-point hitch that set the 30 apart. Operators could hook up a plow or seeder and with a flick of the lever, adjust depth or lift a load in seconds. This wasn't just a technical flourish. In field trials run by the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, the Cockshutt 30 helped farmers finish planting and harvesting up to 15% faster than with the old drawbar rigs. For growers working 40 acres or more, those saved hours meant more money in the bank and less time behind the wheel. The numbers tell their own story. Between 1946 and 1948, more than 10,000 Cockshutt 30s left the Brantford line. Some sources say as many as 12,000, though the original ledgers vanished decades later. Dealers from Manitoba to the Maritimes clamored for shipments, and the machine even found buyers across the border, rebadged as the Co-op E3 and FarmCrest 30. Farmers praised its quick change hitch, the ease of raising a seed drill in under 5 seconds, and the way it cut through the heavy prairie soil. Jack Cockshutt's legacy was now more than a name on a plow. The 30 proved that Canadian engineering could deliver practical, field-tested innovation. While later models would claim the first true live power takeoff, the Cockshutt 30's hydraulic lift and robust build gave Canada's farming heartland a tool that pushed the industry from muscle and sweat to mechanized advantage. In every sense, it was a machine built for a new era, one that put Canadian ingenuity at the forefront of the post-war agricultural boom. In 1953, two giants of the farm machinery world, Massey Harris and Ferguson, joined forces in a move that sent shockwaves through the industry. The new company, Massey Harris Ferguson, was born from the conviction that Canadian ingenuity could not only compete but lead on the world stage. Sir James Dunn, the steel magnate who helped drive the merger, declared, "We are not building for today, but for the future of farming itself." The centerpiece of this ambition rose in Brantford, Ontario, a factory so vast it sprawled across 1.2 million square feet. This was more than bricks and steel. It was a living engine of progress, where the clatter of presses and the hiss of steam powered an operation capable of turning out 30,000 tractors a year. At full tilt, the plant consumed enough raw steel to build a small fleet of locomotives every month. Rows of engines, each one a 60-horsepower promise, rolled down the line, destined for fields from Saskatchewan to South Africa. The merger brought together more than just machines. Harry Ferguson's revolutionary 3-point hitch system, already famous in Europe, now became standard across the new Massey Ferguson lineup. Engineers from both companies worked side by side, refining designs and sharing patents. The result was the MF-35, a tractor that would become legendary for its reliability and versatility. Launched in 1956, the MF-35 was the first model built entirely under the new banner. Its live power takeoff, an innovation Ferguson had championed, let farmers run balers and combines without ever stopping the tractor. At a steady 540 revolutions per minute, the MF-35's power takeoff delivered the kind of performance that competitors scrambled to match. By the end of the decade, more than 300,000 MF-35s had been built worldwide, with a significant share rolling out of Brantford's gates. Inside the factory, the sense of pride was palpable. Workers spoke of the plant as a city unto itself. Cafeterias, tool rooms, even a brass band for company picnics. The pace was relentless, but so was the belief that every finished tractor was a testament to Canadian skill and ambition. For a time, the Brantford plant stood as the beating heart of a global empire. Yet even as the assembly lines surged, the first hints of overcapacity and duplication began to cast their shadow. The golden era was in full swing, but the seeds of future strain were already taking root. Cockshutt's golden years reached their height with the arrival of the 40 and 50 models, machines that didn't just match the competition, but in some ways left it behind. The Cockshutt 40, introduced in 1953, brought a new level of power to the Canadian market. Its Perkins diesel engine delivered 55 horsepower at 2,800 RPM, but it was the fuel economy that turned heads. In an era when every gallon counted, the 40 could outwork rivals while burning less, a fact not lost on prairie farmers who measured success in acres covered per tank. The modular chassis design, with its split-frame construction and easily interchangeable parts, made repairs faster and upgrades possible without a trip back to the factory. Mechanics in small-town garages praised the 6-bolt frame for its simplicity, a feature that let owners keep their machines running through long harvests and harsh winters. The Cockshutt 50, released in 1955, pushed the envelope even further. With a 70 horsepower Perkins diesel under the hood, it set a new power record for Canadian-built tractors. Its hydraulic 4-point hitch, capable of lifting 250 pounds per inch, gave operators unprecedented control over heavy implements. Letters from Ontario bean growers in 1960 described how the 50's instant lift system sped up planting by as much as 20% compared to older rigs. Dealers from Alberta to Nova Scotia boasted of the 50's versatility, offering both high-clearance row crop and low-profile standard models off the same assembly line. These machines became a fixture on Canadian farms, their red paint and bold styling as much a symbol of progress as the harvests they powered. But even as Cockshutt's reputation soared, the ground was shifting beneath their feet. In 1962, the company's independence vanished almost overnight. White Motor Corporation, an American heavyweight in trucks and heavy equipment, acquired Cockshutt in a deal financed by high-yield bonds. The boardroom decision in Chicago promised new markets and cross-sales, but the reality was less certain. Cockshutt's Canadian dealers, fiercely loyal to the brand, bristled at the new distribution model imposed by White. The clash of cultures played out in lost sales. Canadian tractor shipments dropped by 12% between 1963 and 1965. White's debt-fueled expansion left both sides stretched thin, with profits siphoned off to service interest payments rather than reinvest in research or production. The Cockshutt name, once a badge of Canadian ingenuity, now appeared alongside White's stable of brands. The Brantford factory kept its lights on, but the sense of ownership and local pride began to fade. The 1962 sale was more than a corporate transaction. It was the first sign that the heart of Canada's tractor industry was vulnerable, even at the height of its technical achievement. The machines remained strong, but the empire that built them had begun to slip from Canadian hands. In the late 1970s, the numbers on the ledgers began to tilt in the wrong direction. Massey Ferguson's push for global reach, new subsidiaries in the United Kingdom, a sprawling Manitoba factory, and a sales office in London, left the company with duplicate facilities and mounting bills. Operating costs jumped by 18% in a single year. The Brantford plant, once a symbol of industrial muscle, now ran far below capacity. Its echoing assembly lines, a reminder of promises made in better times. Orders for new tractors dropped by 22% as the oil crisis sent diesel prices soaring and farm incomes tumbled across North America. Accountants, usually invisible, became the quiet architects of the crisis. Their reports showed a debt load swelling to $30 million by 1979, with interest payments eating through what little profit remained. The losses were staggering. $62 million in red ink for 1979, followed by another $44 million in 1980. Together, over $100 million vanished in just 2 years. More than a decade's worth of steady margins wiped out almost overnight. The Manitoba plant, built to anchor Western expansion, sat half idle, its workforce facing layoffs as management scrambled to fill the gap. Each quarter brought new cost-cutting memos, but the numbers kept sliding. The era of unchecked growth was over. The company's leaders faced a stark reality. Drastic action was no longer an option, but a necessity. In 1986, the last great gamble played out behind closed doors. Massey Ferguson, battered by a decade of losses and shrinking orders, shed its name and history in a single move. The board approved a rebranding, Varity Corporation, a word chosen to erase the weight of the past and lure new capital. Victor Rice and his team pitched the transformation as a fresh start, assembling a patchwork of banks and export agencies to keep the lights on. Project Sunshine, as they called it, cut away pension liabilities and shuffled assets on paper, but left the Brantford plant exposed, its future mortgaged to a mountain of debt. On June 11, 1987, the reckoning arrived. Receivers stepped through the factory gates with court orders in hand. By the end of that week, production lines that once turned out tractors for the world ground to a halt. The Brantford plant, once the pride of Canadian industry, was silent. Over 1,000 workers, men and women who had built their lives around the rhythm of the assembly line, were told to clear their lockers. Some pressed their hands to the padlocked doors, staring at a future that no longer included the clang of steel or the promise of steady work. The Varity gambit bought only a few months of survival. The final shutdown did more than end production. It severed a century-old bond between a city and its factory, leaving behind empty parking lots and a skyline stripped of smokestacks. The empire had fallen, not with a bang, but in the cold shuffle of balance sheets and the quiet footsteps of workers leaving for the last time. On a cold morning in June 1992, the last Canadian-built Massey Ferguson tractor, an MF 145, rolled off the line. There were no crowds, no speeches, just a handful of workers watching years of tradition come to a quiet end. For more than a century, these factories had churned with the noise of presses and welders, their output measured in acres tilled and harvests gathered. Now their silence speaks louder than any machine ever could. By the early 1990s, the numbers told a stark story. Income from Canadian tractor manufacturing had fallen by nearly 30% in less than a decade. The Brantford plant, once the largest of its kind in the Commonwealth, stood empty, its windows broken and assembly lines stripped for salvage. In Hamilton, weeds pushed through cracked pavement where thousands once parked for their shift. The red Massey Ferguson badge, once a symbol of Canadian ingenuity, had become a relic, its legacy scattered across distant fields and auction blocks. Aerial footage from 2023 captures the ruins from above. Acres of rusted steel, collapsed roofs, and the faded outlines of loading bays where new machines once waited for shipment. The echo of industry lingers, but the empire is gone. What remains is not just the loss of jobs or machinery, but the disappearance of a way of life, one built on the promise that Canadian hands could shape the future of farming. The factories are now ghosts, their stories etched in concrete and silence, reminders of what was built and what was left behind. Steel empires rose on innovation and ambition, then vanished beneath global tides and corporate erasure. Today, not a single Canadian-owned tractor rolls off a local line. The fields still grow, but the power behind them bears no trace of Brantford or Hamilton. History warns, when national industry fades, so does a piece of identity. What legacy do we choose to build or let disappear? Share your thoughts below.